Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who've kept us going for over 400 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Cody W. Brand new dude. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you, Cody.
And of course, we have a sponsor to thank, and it's the best time of year. It's the Jingle Balls year, or Jingle Balls time of year. Of course, I'm talking about Manscaped, and they have several stocking stuffers that you might like to buy for the holiday season. Of course, we're talking about the Crop Preserver or the Crop Reviver. Those are both ball deodorants. One's a spray bottle, one's a cream. If you like to get in there and get handsy with yourself, I don't know what you're
polish those jingle balls. You know, look, you know, the whole point of it is that you know what Manscaped is. You know what it does. You know, it's to keep that forest tidy. You know, because like nobody wants to go and look at a Christmas tree and see a nice hairy jingle ball. They want to see a nice smooth, you know, glistening clean, you know, package. You know, under the tree, you know, because you know that's the whole point here, and that is you don't want to unwrap something that's just a mess. Okay, like you know, you got a cat, it's going to go up that tree, it's going to knock it down, it's going to make a mess. Okay, you know, you want your tree to be nice, clean, trimmed, with some beautiful little balls dangling that are nice and smooth.
And Manscaped's got the best product to help you do that this year, this holiday season. Of course, I'm talking about the Lawnmower 5.0, and I currently have it configured with the Handyman razor head.
I love that razor head. That thing is amazing. It works so good.
It is incredible, and it is gentle, and it works wet or dry.
And it really helps getting all those little curves, you know, like just right around the base of your shaft, you know, and you know, right around like, you know, where the sack start, you know, where the shaft ends and the sack begins, you know, just getting all that like in that nitty gritty.
But it also has like a carrying case, a couple different heads to like let you can just like pop it on and off to get varying lengths, and cleaning is as easy as popping off the razor head and pop it back on. You just run it under the faucet, let it dry out, pop back on, you're good to go. But of course, this is the perfect gift to give your father-in-law if you're ballsy enough. If you want to give a gift for both of your in-laws.
That's right. You know, just because they're your father-in-law doesn't mean they have to spend their retirement years, you know, lost in a forest. So
one last product that I want to shout out because it is my favorite thing by Manscaped currently is their Beard Hedger Pro. I love this thing for a lot of different reasons. We've talked about it before. It's got a dial that lets you adjust without taking off the comb. Got great battery life. I use this thing once or twice a week at least. I've even used it on my head in a pinch. Works great. Again, cleaning super easy. You just pop it on and off. But if you're interested in getting any Manscaped product as a gift, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Make Santa proud this year. Your balls will thank you.
All right. But you know who's not going to be thankful this year? The ESA.
And 3D Realms. And Embracer Group.
Well, pretty much all of Embracer Group.
And WB. Not in games, but, you know, WB is also not going to be particularly happy.
Yeah, I heard that they were like, someone gave them a rating of like 60% likely to bankrupt or something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I found something out. I guess this was more common knowledge that I just happen to not know. So the reason why WB is in the problems or in the trouble that it's in is AT&T bought them, then offloaded a bunch of their outstanding debt onto WB, which is like a thing corporations can do when they want to avoid, you know, bad debt on their books. They can literally just offload their debt or their bankruptcy onto a you know, smaller company that they own.
That sounds like it should be illegal.
It does sound like it should be illegal, but that's what they did. And then the CEO of AT&T hired Zaslav, his literal golfing buddy, to take over WB to handle that. So that's the reason why WB is doing all the weird, shady, you know, shelving things and tax is because they have a bunch of debt that's not theirs, and yeah, I think they're going. I think they're going to get the hell out. I think AT&T is going to sell all their IP and shut WB down.
I thought they already sold them off.
No, I don't think they sold all. No, they're licensing it out. So like Netflix now has all of HBO's crap.
No, I know that. I just thought AT&T and Warner Brothers was no more, and they literally sold it off to Discovery. And then Discovery, quote unquote, merged with it. Am I under this false impression? I thought AT&T was no longer the actual owner. They just got
I think
rid
they
of
own
them.
both, and Discovery and WB merged.
Okay.
I thought. But I might be wrong about that.
Either, but you know, the offloading debt makes sense to me because very ungaming related. But I used to work in a tuition based sector of a school district, a public school district. And when the public school ran out of money, they went into our literal war chest of all the funds we had like saved up over the years and just drained out all the money we had to basically pay themselves like their board salaries or whatever, because nothing got better at the schools because we were all on the same campuses. And I'm like, well, the teachers didn't start getting paid more. The campuses didn't start getting improved. What I'm like, well, what's going on? Well, this just. I mean, I have no proof. I'm literally talking out my ass, but I didn't name any names down, did I?
I googled it. So AT&T spun off Warner into the merger with Discovery. So they still retain like shares and stuff. But yeah, I guess technically they don't run Warner anymore. But Warner still gets to hold all their debt.
That's nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I guess this makes sense because like in a way where it was like, this part of my company's doing well. I'm going to take all that money to basically like solve all my problems that I made, even though they had nothing to do with it. So it's like, yeah, for them, it's like, well, you take my debt.
Oh, I think something that's interesting is a couple of my friends that did like business school. The deeper you get into business school is all ethical practices and stuff, and then you start your own business, and you get a mentor. Is ideally you want to get a mentor for your business mentor, and basically you just learn most corporate business is just shadier and shadier ways to get rid of debt, to use debt and get rid of debt.
Yeah,
it's not great.
Well, it's like they start trading debt around like it's a commodity.
Oh, debt is a commodity. The entire American economy is built off of debt. You heard it here first.
Well, yeah, that's basically been true since the end of the Second World War. But
yeah,
then got more true in the 70s.
It is unfortunate, but you know who else is also doing some? I wouldn't call it necessarily shady, but it is shitty. Is of course Embracer Group just announced they.
Yeah,
I think this week they shut down Free Radical finally.
Done the 11th Free Radical, which was already kind of basically like people knew it was happening. It was coming in, and then it happened. Rumored and then like soft confirmed, basically being like someone basically just said off the record, yeah, it's happening, and then officially happened. I guess I don't know if that's a term that's ever really been used. Soft confirmed, Well, I guess I just made it up. Where it's like basically you've got it's like someone, an employee of said company, who
off the record says,
who anonymously says this is happening, which basically and then however many days later. But yeah, so Free Radical's gone before they even got any their first project off the ground. So Free Radical went away. Well, the first they got bought by Crytek, and then they got shut down. And then it was like, oh, Embracer was gonna reform Free Radical with this same David Doak, same people. They're gonna bring Time Splitters back, gonna bring the whole company back, and then they're shut down before their game. And then today apparently most of GT 3D runs not GT. That was their old. GT Interactive was the old publishing name, but 3D Realms Splitgate. Yeah, so 3D Realms got a ton of people laid off today. So if you loved shooters in the late 90s, early 2000s, go F yourself. So
I feel like I'm getting that a lot. I'm not going to get my second Sight
somewhere
sequel ever, and now I'm also
somewhere a Canadian is crying, profusely. And the thing is, I do feel really bad about this, and to go back to like, why is this happening? Why is everyone getting fired from Embracer? Because Embracer got pretty much got effed in the A on the last minute. They bought all this company, they bought all this IP and did all this stuff on the assumption that a big deal with Saudi Arabia was going to go through, and then it didn't. Was it Saudi Arabia or was it UAE?
I don't remember what, but
I thought it was Saudi
it's one of those
Arabia.
funds.
I
Yeah.
thought it was Saudi Arabia, but anyways, they thought because they're investing very heavily into the gaming and tech and esports market. Hey, they bought SNK.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to get like some huge, I don't know what you call it, a loan or just sort of
Cash
an,
infusion.
an influx, right?
So Saudi Arabia is diversifying its holdings. Basically, they want to get out of owning only oil as an income, and so they're using their wealth fund to diversify in all sorts of stuff, including gaming and technology. And they're one of the biggest backers of Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. That's why now Twitter is like all Saudi Arabia, and you know. I think UAE is also a backer of it. So like a bunch of the ads are like about Saudi investments and stuff like that.
Oh, that's because everyone else left too.
Well, yeah, a lot of people leaving. But yeah, I think if they would have had that deal go through, there would have been a big cash infusion into Embracer, and
Right.
Embracer's stock portfolio would have gone.
And apparently, like we're talking like an hour before the deal was supposed to close, they backed out of it. And I remember hearing talk about it because the CEO of Embracer was basically in tears on the conference call the next day because he was like he was supposed to basically be it was supposed to be this victory lap, and then like it just defeats victory was snatched away at the last second by the jaws
I wonder
of defeat.
what bonus would have been. Oh man, his bonus would have been like probably pretty beefy from that.
Yeah. So, anyways, the point is that they basically they put their cart before the horse, their wagon before the horse. They were like they had all this. They basically were like, here's this carton of eggs. It's going to be filled with eggs. Just as soon as my chickens lay them. Oh, my chickens ran away. Shit.
Yeah. I mean, this is like the weirdest. It's not weird. This is like a nothing but sad news week and episode. I mean,
if anything, it should tell you right now, like, don't go buying every IP and studio and starting up every, comeback story thing until you have the actual physical money in the bank.
part of me wonders if they were trying to get ahead of the news so that they didn't have to pay out the nose. Like somebody didn't want to.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And the only reason I think they may why did they do it this way? Maybe they were trying to. Maybe this was all part of their grand plan to seal the deal with them by saying, "Look, we have all the IP, we have all these IPs. You definitely you definitely want to close this deal with us because look at what we got. Look at what we have everything." And then for whatever reason they just
it all fell through.
I'm the captain now.
If they could have just made one good like Duke Nukem reboot, or if 3D Realms just could have gotten just a Duke Nukem reboot.
I don't know what you do with Duke Nukem, honestly, because Duke is just, Duke's a piece of shit. Like he has no play. Like classic.
You go Far Cry Blood Dragon with him,
right? Like Duke Nukem as he was has no place in modern. He has a place if you want, but it's just if your whole audience is just chuds, sure, Duke, you could bring Duke Nukem back, whatever. Or you could try to be actually like really funny with it. And
that's the way I would go.
And sort of reboot Duke. Duke can be a horn dog and whatever, and he can be big buff action man, but he could also be there's ways of doing it to make Duke still like because here's the thing, like if you we treaded into Duke Nukem water, so we're here, we're in an awkward swamp now, so let me just say this, it's like Duke could be a sex positive character, who you could literally have him address like, hey, because my personal feelings is that like I don't begrudge or hate anyone who works in that industry or whatever, because remember how there was like a paramedic during COVID or whatever, or even was pre-COVID, and people were getting on her case because she was an EMT worker, but she had an OnlyFans site. And someone, I think it was that one what is he, Senator House, the one lady in New York every Republican hates with passion, Cortez, whatever her name is, I don't know. She basically
AOC,
yeah, she basically stood up for her by basically saying like, why you shaming her, right? And I think this is an area where Duke can still succeed, where it's like, hey, he can be positive, but he just doesn't have to be like gross about it. Because and when I say gross, here's my example. In the Gearbox published, finished Duke Nukem Forever, there's a scene where some babe or whatever gets grabbed by like an alien tentacle or whatever, and you hear all the squishy bits going on, and he just goes, "You're fucked," and it's like, yeah, that's just not a joke that Duke should be making, in the 2020s.
But he wasn't wrong.
But I mean, like, you're making light of the fact that someone's getting sexually assaulted, right? That's not that's not a joke. It's not a joke you want to be making anymore.
You could do like a very Last Action Hero thing with them, where, you could go that, like, you could set it in the 80s and have like an 80s version of the future.
Yeah, you could maybe
Shadow Warrior him,
Yeah, you
basically.
could maybe even Johnny Bravo him, where he's just oblivious to like how dumb he sounds. That's one way to go. Or you could just have Duke just be like a very sex positive muscle man, whatever, but he's just not he's not one to make light of a terrible situation,
Right.
involving someone. So I mean, like, I think there's ways to do it. I think it could be done. Like,
well, it won't be now.
It won't be now because, well, I mean, 3D Realms hasn't really had the Duke license really for a while. Well, I don't know if they had or did or didn't have the license. But
did they sell it to somebody?
Well, I don't know if they sold it to Gearbox or if they just they handed it over the rights for Gearbox to finish it. I don't really know, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe I don't know how you would do it. I think it could. I'm just saying I think it could be done, but I'm maybe not the guy. Obviously, I'm not the guy to write it or whatever. But like, you look at stuff like Bayonetta is considered like she's a quote unquote sexy character, but she's more sex positive than just eye candy or whatever. And I don't know. What you do is you bring in professionals on this, people, bring in some actual comedians, bring in some specialists on this, because it's like, okay, well, what is this character known for? Kind of just being a sleazeball.
I mean, he's the goofy take of the Doom guy,
right?
That's all he really is. So you can just have him fighting aliens, and be just one big rip off of the Doom guy again.
Yeah.
Instead of wearing the big beefy armor, he's just in a red tank top and some tight jeans.
Right,
like,
yeah.
He's sort of like because Serious Sam was also a takedown.
Yeah. Serious Sam was like that without any of the gratuitous sexuality stuff that Duke Nukem wasn't known for. Because
Duke Nukem was born in that.
Right,
because you're going to go R-rated, you got to go real R-rated.
As I say, Duke came from the frat boy era of video gaming, where it was just kind of like her, like, there's a really shitty animated sprite or GIF, really, of like a 2 animated thing, of like
of a stripper,
stripper, and you could go like give money or whatever, and
yeah, I don't know anybody who liked that.
Yeah, well, at the time it was like her, like we're seeing this in a video game, isn't that great? And it's like,
pixelated
now,
boobies.
I mean, I think at this point now it's just kind of like,
well, it's like the Lara Croft.
It's like, what is even the joke anymore, kind of thing.
What was it, Tomb Raider 3 or wherever, where it's like you can get that glitch where her top doesn't show up, and it's just like, oh yeah, her boobs are out. It's just like flesh triangles, like it's still the same shape. It's just the blue doesn't show up or something like that.
I don't know if there was a glitch. I mean, everyone was looking for the where's the nude code, and I'm like, this thing looks like a Lego. Okay,
yeah. Times were rough. Okay, the internet wasn't there. It wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't mature enough on the internet.
See, here's maybe Tomb Raider is kind of like a good pivot where it's like, because again, Embracer owns, I think Embracer owns Tomb Raider as well.
Yeah, Tomb Raider also
Um,
probably not.
also in dev hell, but they've rebooted Tomb Raider twice. And I think Crystal Dynamics has done both reboots, and they're doing the third one. They're also now, which is hilarious in a way because it's like they rebooted Tomb Raider for, I think it was Legends, Tomb Raider Legends, and then Underworld and Anniversary, and then they rebooted it again for just Tomb Raider with Rise of Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I guess they're going to reboot it again, with Amazon games.
Which I don't
So
really know. I mean, did you like the Tomb Raider? What was it, 2016, 2017?
13, 16, whatever it was. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the
Reboot.
Uncharted reboot.
Uncharted Tomb Raider. So here's the funny thing about that is like it was, I beat it. Me and Max beat that first
Yeah.
game, and it wasn't bad by any means.
Yeah, I liked it.
It was a little long. Maybe kind of overstayed its welcome a little bit. There was tons of crazy ludo narrative dissonance. Like just like the island is just littered with skulls everywhere. There's just so many
Yeah.
bodies. Just like what? Like how many people were abandoned on this island? I mean,
Like a lot. That's the food.
apparently, yeah. There's your food supply. Anyways, but here's the thing about it. Like, the thing anyone even remembers about that game is just the gratuitous death sequence. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
like a tree branch, goes, it goes through her neck or whatever. And the thing about that is some people remember classic Lara Croft because her. I wanted to see polygon titties, right? And then what do people remember the most recent one, if anything, if they remember it? It's like, well, they had gruesome deaths. Because here's the thing, they made Laura almost too bland. And in a way, it was almost too much of a pivot where it's like
Mhm.
we got to go to this really grounded, realistic take, where she's just gonna have, she's just gonna be wearing like, dirty jeans and a dirty shirt and she's going to get really fucked up and she's going to get bloodied and shot and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, and then what's the personality of the new Tomb Raider? Well, she has none practically. Like even she talks a lot because every character had to talk to themselves constantly.
Yeah.
But
I hope we're out of that. I
but
hope
yeah,
we're
like
leaving that behind.
there's no because like she was like a smarmy '90s hero in the original Tomb Raider, and
Big guns, yeah.
at least it was something you could point to and say that's her personality. She's like a smarmy, self-sure and femme fatale Indiana Jones. And then what did she turn into? Someone who gets really beat up. Like I don't know. It's like I don't know. I can't. I mean, I didn't play the two follow-up Tomb Raider games because like one was enough. But like I couldn't tell you anything about her personality from that whole game, and she talked a lot in it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I liked the game and I
And I
liked
did
the new
like the
direction of
game,
it,
but
but
I'm just saying, like, the characterization of Laura Croft kind of like was in a way where, okay, well, we don't want her to be a sex symbol anymore. So what is she? Nathan Drake.
without the quips.
Without quips. She's just Nathan Drake, but scared all the
Right.
time. And I'm like,
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if they reboot it now, I hope they stick more towards the combat and the stuff like the 20 whatever the first one, Tomb Raider.
reboot, whatever.
Yeah, but I do sort of hope that they bring back in more puzzles and
That was kind of a thing because, like, you could side quest into some areas to sort of solve some light puzzles in that Tomb Raider reboot, but
yeah,
it was all for side stuff. It wasn't even like
right.
main story. That was like another thing too. So
Well, that was always one of my problems with Uncharted is like it didn't, in my opinion, have enough actual tomb raiding, like enough.
yeah, yeah, and I remember the first game in particular, and even really the second, and to an extent the third as well, where it was like it felt like a light gun game
A little bit, yeah.
with these climbing sections because you would basically you do this like auto climbing stuff. And then you would just go into the sequence where like you're just behind something and you pop and stop and you just pop up and shoot. I'm like, this is a
And then you
light
pull
gun
out your
game.
notebook, and your
Yeah, and
notebook
then
has the solution to
I'm
the
like,
thing. Yeah.
this is a light gun game practically at this point, like like in a weird sort of way because it literally would just like stop. Here's an openish area, kill
Right.
all the people around there, move on, then climb up your linear path. And this is why I kind of like 4 because 4 had those big giant open zones and you had the hook shot to swing around in. So Four felt like it was trying to add some gameplay diversity to the Uncharted formula.
And oddly enough, I think one of the things that would work for Uncharted, which was sort of moved towards in 4, is the idea of that like larger open world where it's like instead of like you go hallway where you're doing your climbing or your puzzles or whatever to open area where you do all your combat to hallway to cliff to hallway to open area, that kind of thing. Having an open world where it's like, oh, well, if you climb up this cliff, you can go rooting around and like, oh, it'll give you a clue to where you got to go over on this side of, like an open world, sort of like Far Cry.
Yeah,
but you're tomb raiding. Like that would be cool.
Yeah, and so I think what we're kind of saying here with these is something that also came up at the news, which we hadn't. I know we didn't plan to talk about this at all, but I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah,
and it's sort of like because I think it's the theme of this episode is going to be rebooting in general, rebooting games, rebooting game shows. So rebooting Duke Nukem, I think you still could do it. I think you could still.
Yeah.
I think Duke could still be himself, but I'm like, he just can't be a sex pest. He just needs to be sex positive. Tomb Raider needs personality back, right? You can reboot Tomb Raider, but I just think Lara Croft needs to have something.
And it probably won't be rebooted since Embracer Group seems like it's burning everything down.
Well, because Amazon's paying for it, so it'll probably actually still get completed.
Maybe.
So
let's hope.
So there is that, but recently Enuma started to come under fire, and it caused a civil war amongst the Zelda fandom. And I was happy to see at least some people who were like kind of like at least kind of seeing, because my point is basically that like I've pretty much fallen mostly out of love entirely with the Zelda franchise at this point. I don't think
he took over, especially.
I don't think it's bad, and I don't think it's going in the wrong direction. It's clearly going in the right financial direction. I don't think that's disputed. What some people just don't get, because someone I think it was IGN or maybe Polygon asked Enuma, because he was in town, for his 30-second acceptance speech, and some people were saying like, do you ever think you'll go back to a more linear approach to Zelda or something like more like the earlier 3D titles? And he said that like, I think people have I think people don't understand what they're asking for. He says like they're having this grass is always greener nostalgia trip where they think, something was better in the past, but it's really not. Which people were really not really too happy with that attitude that like, oh, you think it's literally Blizzard going, you think you want classic WoW, but you don't. Oh, but they did. But they did. And the thing is that I don't know if it's if we can say the interviewer or the translator or whatever, but this is far from the first time Enuma said something dumb. I've been on this guy's ass, and it's almost frustrating to me that people are more upset about that he was saying you have nostalgia goggles for older games than they are about his comments regarding Zelda and female Link in 2016. That is so much like that was like here I'm gonna say something that's basically straight out misogyny. People kind of brush it under the rug because wow, that Breath of the Wild looks good, but when he tells you your nostalgia is making you think the old games were better, how dare you, sir?
Yeah,
like it almost shows how much of a boys club mentality like the Zelda fandom and gaming in particular still kind of has, where it's just kind of like, really, this is the issue you lose your shit over? Oh, because you feel personally attacked.
So this is sort of weird because I agree with the whole concept of like, oh, you don't really know what you're asking for, because a lot of the time the audience doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means they don't know what they're actually asking for.
And here's the thing. I think the question may have been worded wrong, or they should have pressed further in, where it's like, because here's what I didn't engage really with this other than to just say this is not the first. The only thing I said on this issue was just like, this is not the first time Enuma said something dumb. But here's the dumb thing here, where it's just like, we're not asking. I don't think we're like most of us. We're not asking. We want a linear Zelda game. That's not what people are asking for. People are not asking for the return of Skyward Sword.
Right.
People are we just want fucking good dungeons. Like, to quote other content creators, like, we just want good dungeons and a good story, man.
That might be though. I mean, if it was phrased that way, I think, yeah, there's no arguing with it.
Because that's the thing is no journalist journalist really has the balls to sit there and say, like, you've really scaled back the dungeons. There was a slight improvement in tiers, but are you ever going to go back to having like actually big dungeons with like that are intricate and complex, or are you just going to have these extended shrines? Like, I fucking be snippy with him.
So there's this older games, especially like 8-bit games, but older games, there is a strong argument that you could say like older games are better than modern games.
Mm.
I don't think you could say that in the area of realistic visuals, which we both know isn't that important. Graphics aren't that important, but or in story. Story in games today way better than it was back in the day,
Yeah,
period. Just generally speaking, because
not for
now
Zelda though.
no. Well, yeah, but like even Zelda back in the day, like it was a vagary that on the back of the box, so and there was a little bit of hints that they would hide
Yeah.
within, but like there wasn't
Well,
really
there'd be a couple games would come out and be like, "Oh, there's something going on here," and then the
right.
other ones
Link's
would be
Awakening. Link's
right.
Awakening had like an actual story
You'd get
narrative,
like the oddball every 3 or 4 games. You'd get one that actually had a banger of a story.
but for the most part, there just wasn't like a lot of story in older games that was actual like that actually made sense. Like a lot of story in older games was nonsensical, but the games were probably better. I think there's actually like you could make solid arguments as to why older games are better. I think the reason is today the vast majority of resources don't go into developing a gameplay loop, that
Mm-hmm.
is a phenomenal. It goes
Yeah.
more into like how are your graphics, how big is the world,
How much content do
you know,
you have?
older games, music and style and gameplay loop. Newer games, story, size, graphics. Those are the things that matter. So yeah, I would actually sort of agree where it's like, yeah, older games are better, and it's not just nostalgia. In terms of like actual being an
Mm-hmm.
actual game. Again, weird balance. I don't think I ever want to be on the same side as Zanuma because I disagree with him on a lot of shit that he says, but I do actually sort of agree that most of the time the audience doesn't know what they're asking for. But the caveat, again, to repeat, it doesn't mean that they're wrong in asking for it. It just means
Right.
they don't actually know what they're asking for.
Well, it's just kind of like this weird thing where it's kind of like I made successful. I don't need to listen to you, kind of thing, or whatever. But it's at the same time, I don't know. Like they're clearly doing something right.
Right.
But I also think, and he said that he did say this in an interview that like they don't think they're going to go back to this Hyrule again, like this. And I'm like, of course, well, I really would hope not, because you've exhausted everything you can do on the world map of both games, because they share the same world map. So Breath of the Wild, Tears
Mhm.
of the Kingdom, you cannot go back to that map. You do that, and then you will definitely have started the exhaustion phase or whatever. So and I think they know that already, but um yeah, I'm more just sort of annoyed with the idea that like this wasn't this wasn't pressed. The issue wasn't pressed. Like, like, yes, they said, "Are we ever going to go back to like having bigger dungeons, in a linear fashion?" It's just like, oh, I don't know, you don't know what you want. Like, that's just. I could put the full quote, but it's more just kind of like, man, when you make this much money and you sell to these many people, there's no reason you couldn't. I don't know, just experiment a little bit. I don't know, because what I would be asking, I don't even, for me personally, I'm not even really asking for them to change their new winning formula. Keep what you got. That's fine, but just have real dungeons, for the love of Christ.
Right.
Um, I would like you to be able to find items that expand the gameplay in those dungeons throughout the course of the game, not just at the very beginning. Like finding a hook shot, right? Even if it's not every dungeon, or it's not like a ton of things, because they've only done like 4. They do 4 dungeons per game. Like you could think of four key items, that's it. That's not asking a ton, but like getting cool new key items that open up new gameplay abilities, because you kind of got that with Breath of the Wild. Like you'd get a hero's blessing or whatever, where it's like, oh, you could do like a really high jump. That was like that was really the only gameplay altering one, I guess. One was just like, here's a shield, here's a well, one was like a lightning spell or whatever.
If
But
God
like,
of War can do it, with
right,
a
right.
spear and all that stuff, like
So
Zelda, the OG can do it.
yeah, like I'm just give us dungeons, even and do or don't have key items like hook shots, but like I think it would serve to make the game it would be more intriguing, more enticing to go into these dungeons to know that, oh, there's something really cool I'll unlock doing it. The way they handled the hero spirits, like the ghosts running around with you, fucking awful in Tears of the Kingdom. The way you have to use their abilities, fuck that. So
So tell me how you really feel.
so like that was not good. It's like not good.
Fuck
I'm
that.
saying, so I mean, just like real dungeons, please give us key items. You don't have to change the formula to have a decent combat system. And I've seen people like, again, the civil war of these Zelda trolls going back and forth about people will basically do this thing where they show all this crazy crap you can do using all the different abilities to kill a singular enemy, and it's like, or you could have run up and hit him 3 times. Like this guy, like, oh, he knocked him in the air, he froze him in the air, he used time freeze, he used like the teleport movie, and they did this, they did that. I'm like, or he could have hit him 3 times. Like, yes, it's crazy how he used all these other items and abilities not meant for combat in combat. That's cool, but that was never the intention of the game to fight the enemies that way, and B, it's massive overkill because you could have just hit him 3 times with the sword and be done with it.
We've also just like gaming in general, I think especially in the last 10 years has become obsessed with possibility rather than like thoughtfulness. Like
and
combat wasn't designed in
Yeah.
Tears of the Kingdom to do all that. Instead, it was like, oh, but with these, there's infinite possibilities with this,
Right. So
which is cool, but it's not.
It is cool, and I don't think you have to get rid of that. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be nice if there was some finesse
Right.
to the actual combat? Like delayed button presses to do different swings. Like holding forward or holding back for different types of swing arcs with your sword. Like there's
or enemies that require that kind of
right. And Virtua
thinking,
Fighter showed this forever ago, like how like you can do so much with a single button press. So it's like I don't think we're asking for the moon here to have stuff like helm breakers, like rolling around, like roll around slices, like just some of the stuff that Twilight Princess had back in the day, like good parries, like killing moves, like when you knock an enemy down, having the ability to jump down and like do a killing stab. Be nice to have stuff like that back. I'm just saying, like you don't have to do anything to your open world formula. Like you could keep all of that, but you could have a combat system with some finesse. You could do it. You could do it.
Yeah,
you could do it. And then the other 2 points, which are presentation based, one you could give someone who gave one single solitary flying fuck about narrative write anything for the story, because holy God in heaven, the non-answers that Fujibayashi gave when they're like, hey, this contradicts your last game that you directed and you wrote. Hey, well, he's like, it's like in real life. Sometimes you find data that like changes history. So we just don't have the data, or maybe you're right, maybe we're wrong. I don't know. That's like, really, bro. Like, you're the writer, and I don't know if I'm right in my own stuff. Get at what the hell?
Okay, but this is something with like, and not all Japanese devs, but I would call them like the not the traditional developers, but like Nintendo, for instance. I don't think Nintendo in general necessarily cares about story making
No,
any
they
kind of
don't.
sense,
They
because
really don't.
Nintendo is from the age where story was like an after. Who gives a shit? You don't need story for a good game, which you don't. But nowadays, people want that story. They want
And here's the thing,
continuity.
I'm okay with them being like this. I am totally fine with that. Like, clearly,
Right.
I mean, it's funny how much they've remade Star Fox 1. Mario is always the same way, where it's just like they put no thought into it, and it's like, who cares? Whatever. Donkey Kong,
Well,
really the same way.
when people get all upset, like, God, I saw this post where someone was just all like, "Oh, I don't know why people love the Mario movie so much. It ignores so much lore." And I'm like, "What fucking lore? Like what? Like what are you
These are not
doing?"
the sacred texts. What are you talking about?
Like who?
So very
What
much so, but
prophet
like
are you listening to? I
their
don't-
whole idea that we're gonna have like because they literally said like, oh yeah, like seems like you really like when Galaxy 2 came out and they were like, oh, why did you cut out so much story cutscenes and whatever? Like I don't need it in a Mario game. Zelda's more a game for story. I'm like Miyamoto has literally said like, oh well, story's good in a game like Zelda, but maybe not so much for Mario and other games. And it's like, okay, that's true. That is true. But then Zelda comes along and you're like, what are you gonna do with story? I don't know. I'm just gonna like
I mean, one thing that I should Western audiences, the way we view plot versus like specifically Japanese audiences, how they view plot, very different. Like we're like cause and effect, and like Japanese plots can be from their theater all the way through their books, their movies, can all be like dream driven, like dream logic
like
can
Boy
run
and the
it.
Heron.
Yes, actually, yes. Miyazaki is a perfect example of like dream logic is all that matters in his movies. Now, whereas like in something personally, I think in a story you set the rules. Like the rules can be whatever you want in the story, but you set the rules for the story, and then you don't break the rules of your own story, so that no matter what happens, people can go like, "Ah, yes, this makes sense." Whatever it is, like farts make you fly. You establish that in the first 5 minutes, and it doesn't matter if it's real or not. Later on, when you save yourself by farting, it makes sense. The reason, like, dream logic means that whatever works to solve the problem doesn't necessarily need to be established earlier in the film. And the Boy and the Heron is kind of a perfect example of like how all of a sudden it'll just be like, this is just the way it is. Deal with it. You know, like, there's a king of the birds. Go. And you're just like, okay. But uh part of me is like, oh, there might be a reason why a bunch of these like Japanese developers and writers like just don't care. You know, they're just
I
and
mean,
they don't
the
want to say
thing,
I don't care. Like
yeah, and they, I feel like because they did like multiple interviews, I feel like Fujibayashi, especially Ananuma, to an extent, they kind of did say they don't care. Because Anuma's reiterated again, like, oh, we don't want to like, we don't want to get too tied down in story points, but that'll tie us down. I'm like, no, it won't. And I'm like,
I'm,
like I'm
I
like,
can agree with it.
it doesn't take a lot in a Zelda game in particular to like write out a reason why this is different or this changes or whatever. I'm
Especially
like,
because people will just sort of accept whatever it is. You
yeah,
know, like I, I, I don't know. I actually agree with them. Where like we don't want to get tied down because again, the point of the game isn't necessarily the story. The point of the game
right.
is the game.
It's
Like
but like there's something really really weird, right? When we have this whole story of Breath of the Wild with the Calamity Ganon, and we had to awaken those big divine beasts to go and
right.
help us defeat it. And then like the divine beasts are just nowhere in the second game, which is supposed to be it's using the same map, it has the same characters, takes place like 6-10 years later, whatever it is, right? And then people like no one mentions it.
They went
No
home.
one asks about it, and they're just like, well, "What happened?" His answer was like, "Oh, well, we don't really know what happened, but since they just like his answer is like they just disappeared one day, and since like weird things happen to her all the time, nobody questioned it." I'm like, "You, dude, what?" Like nobody questioned it.
Incredible.
Like, holy fuck!
You know, speaking of things that just disappeared one day.
Music
This,
from Zelda games.
yeah, yeah.
Can
Nobody questioned it.
can we just like like that would go a long way for me to put music like there's really nothing else to say on this. I just wanted to get that in that like spend some money like hire some composers, do something. Fuck your ambience.
You went from
Like
Koji Kondo to I
it's the
guess
animal
nothing.
it's the Animal Crossing lady, and boy is she there's technically multiple people who do. It's funny because they even called it the Nintendo Sound Team for the Game Awards because they didn't even really know who to say necessarily, but it's just kind of
Like,
like the
there's
lead
just like a
on
lack of
yeah, like the lead on Breath of the Wild and probably Tears was one of the composers who did a couple of the Animal Crossing games, and it's
huh.
like she's not a good fit for Zelda. She's not. She's effing not. Like
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily her. They just didn't want a ton of music.
I'm sure it's both. I'm sure it's column A,
Yeah.
column B, where it's like this is this person's style. Charles do some stuff like that. Okay, we also kind of want to go mostly ambience and bird noises and fuck you, like just I don't know, like I'm playing through that Avatar game. I'm not on sponsorship anymore, so I can say this for more freely. I like the game. I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
No music, huh?
It's no, man, not really. Not really, no. Like every so often you get these key moments. They have this amazing title, not title drop, but like moment, where you're escaping from this base you've been living in your whole life and you get into the forest for the first time and they have this really great musical kind of like, music tracks with your actions. And then it just goes the fuck away because it's a Western developed game and apparently like having music in your video game is like, I don't know, is gonna cost some developers dick in France to fall off or something. I don't know. It's
Well, I sort of treat it the way that I feel music should be treated in movies, where it's like a lot of movies, especially like Hollywood movies, there's music constantly, all the time for everything. There's wacky music in the comedy scenes, there's
yeah.
hard music in the action, and I'm just like, music when music is needed is really great. You don't need to have music every friggin' scene.
We're gonna try. I'm gonna reach out to him, and we're gonna try to actually get a guest on and talk kind of like
Yeah.
music theory and music and gaming. But I personally feel that we are doing gaming a huge disservice, especially because people are like, oh, well, you're in these big open environments, you don't want to be, constantly bombarded with music. Fuck you, yes, I do. It's all about me. Have the right music for the right place because music should elevate and carry a place. Music should be part of the character of the environment of the world of the spot in the game.
Well, again, we come back to like thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like, oh, the composers of today's games aren't thoughtful. What I mean is like, I think that there used to also be a lot more planning around music in the development cycle, and now music is getting treated like the last step.
Well, the thing is,
But
I'm not a composer, but like part of me is sitting there thinking in this way of like, okay, I think they hire people in and they're like, we're going to have these cutscenes and this cutscenes. Here's our moments. Here's our key story bit moments. Really want you to like, come in here, give us a character theme and then give us some like cutscene theme. And then we're going to have this game because games have to have so much content, like we said, right? They have to have so much
right,
stuff in them.
games
And
are
it's,
longer than they've ever been,
ever
and
been. So it's
yeah,
like we're gonna have all this other content. We're not even gonna bother. You don't need to write anything else for anything else. Just here's our pivotal cutscenes. Here's like a maybe have a character theme here or two.
actually, I sort of
Yeah.
agree with that. Because think about like, again, going all the way back to the 8-bit era, you'd 29 minutes of music. And some of that music would be like the hardest shit you've ever heard in chiptune form. But nowadays it's like, oh yeah, 29 hours of in-game music. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, you can't write the same kind of music that you would do for a chiptune
Right.
platform or whatever. You just don't. You wouldn't do that.
Hmm.
You gotta have the music. The music has to be more thoughtful in its approach than just like give me a banger.
Right.
Someone submits like a 2-minute banger. Make sure it loops good. Okay, make sure you have a 2.5 minute looping song that's a real banger. Cool. You hear that song for however long you're stuck on a level. If you don't die, you're on that level for 2 to 5 minutes. If you do die, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And
Right.
then, but like, yeah, right. So, but now with I'm out in an environment for tens of hours on end. You got to have music that works and fits that. Part of that is dynamic. You can
And it
make
can't
dynamic,
loop every 2 minutes in that kind of environment.
right, which is why like field themes in Xenoblade are like 8 minutes long.
Yeah.
And they do loop, but it's just kind of interesting that way. But you're also broken up a lot because battle music changes or whatever. Nighttime, day to night has it's the same theme, but like done with different instrumentation and speed between day and night.
Interesting.
Which
Yeah.
is that's how you're supposed to do it.
So to jump topics a little bit, I know we wanted to talk about this a little bit before the episode ends. Uh, E3 is officially no longer there is no
w-
ambiguity about it. It is dead.
I feel like we were calling this. We've been waiting on this for like years on
We've
this
called
podcast.
yeah, we called it. We just called it early, I guess.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that when we first called this, it was like 2017, and we mentioned like E3's heading for trouble. And I don't remember who it is exactly, but somebody basically said that we were the dumbest people alive.
Oh,
And that's
really?
yeah, someone was all like, "Oh yeah, just listen to the." I think it was a review we got somewhere. It was just all like, and they think E3 is gonna die. These guys are the biggest idiots. Well, suck it. Not
It's
that I'm
been
actually happy E3 is dead. I I
it's
don't.
been 4 or 5 years. There hasn't been an E3 since 2019, and that is officially, by their own admission,
Dead.
dead.
Yeah. ESA squandered.
You go back and find that and be like, yeah, who was right now? It's
Yeah, I don't, I don't know why it's stuck with me because I'm petty. I'm a petty bitch, I guess. Um, but I do think since we're on the theme of reboots and we're talking about reboots, we should end the episode with um do you really think we're going to go all digital? Yes, is it the digital age that killed E3? I actually say no. I think the thing that killed E3 was its own success. I think going public is what killed E3, not the
there
idea
were
of like
okay,
inviting
because
the public
look,
in.
all I'm gonna say this. I do think Nintendo was one of the biggest contributors to killing E3. I really do. But it's not the silver bullet. It's not a sniper rifle to the head. It was just like a really good gut shot.
Right.
Um, just sort of like showing people what well, you don't have to spend this many millions of dollars just to get your message out there. Um, but yeah, like like you were kind of already implying there were issues leading up to the demise of E3
Like a
before.
lot.
Like anyone who was like a little bit tuned in knew that the behind the scenes, and someone like yesterday I was talking about it pointed out, dude, 2016, 2017, it was already starting to get like, chunks of the show floor were starting to be empty.
Yeah, it was flagging. Yeah.
Yeah, like the signs were actually there even before, Nintendo Directs happened.
I the thing is like when I say them going public is what caused the final death knell, what I actually mean is not necessarily like, oh, the public getting tickets to go. Um, I think they made it such a prestige thing that so many people were finding ways of getting in that companies were going so big that it made E3 not worth the squeeze. Like it
Yeah.
they actively made it so that it wasn't worth going to E3 anymore, even though they were gaming Christmas. And I don't think the trade shows are going to disappear. Like there's always going to be that guy that's got to buy however many units for the show. And
Hmm.
while we are transitioning entirely to digital storefronts, I think it's going to swing back to physical media again too,
Yeah.
just because people don't like digital libraries disappearing on them.
The thing is, I think people like hanging out too. I think people like we're as human beings, we tend to be social creatures, and PAX has
Right.
been successful. PAX didn't go anywhere. MagFest hasn't really gone anywhere. There's
And developers and publishers need a place to make deals that they feel like they can like schmooze.
Yeah, and
Like they need
the
that
thing
shit.
is, well, a lot of
It's
people
gonna come back.
a lot of people forget this, but like people think E3 was a media event, and they used to treat it as such. They definitely were treating it as such in the
Right.
later half of its life. But when E3 began in '95, and for at least the first half, if not more, of its life, the primary goal of the show was for companies to sell product to retailers. It is a
Mhm.
retail trade show. They basically would show up like, here's our product we're going to sell for the holidays. How many units? How many units can I put you down for?
The other
That
thing to
was
remember is in the early days too, all the trades, all the publications were owned by the companies at E3. Like they were debuting for the people they were selling to. Metal Gear Solid being on stage for what it was for the people they were selling to. They were making a big splash about it. And then whatever magazine was going to carry it was usually owned by the company that was debuting, or the publisher that was
Well, I mean, that's
debuting.
certainly true of like Nintendo Power and stuff like that. Because I
Absolutely.
remember
Yeah.
even all the way up until Twilight Princess's release, where we got all these exclusive E3 hands-on and screenshots. I'm like, yeah, you're Nintendo Power. You're owned at the
Right.
time. You're owned by the company. Like, of course, you got official PlayStation magazine. If there
Uh,
was an official Xbox one at some point, but
yeah, I don't remember what it was called. It was not long lived, but there was like Independent Gamer and
yeah. But yeah, like so. Here's the thing. So the future might be like, oh well, it's the age of E3 is ended. The dawn of Keighley begins now, and a lot of people have already kind of expressed like, I don't know if I really like that, and for me, I'm like, oh, I've never been invited to Keighley shows, so F him. Like, here's the thing, here's the danger. I feel like I have to keep bringing this up until it sticks. I think there is an inherent danger by having a very small, tight-knit, exclusive game show. Now, I understand for certain content creators who do go, I love this. I get to go and I don't have to like wade through any crowds and I could just get the game capture and it's great. And it's like, yes, that is great for you, but let's not talk about how great it is for the invited. Let's talk about where the danger lies, and that is it's an even more point because people are always like, oh, journalists don't know what they're talking about. They don't know how to play video games. Their opinion means nothing. You can't spell ignorant without IGN, blah, blah, blah. Having small focused events like Keeley's things and other site type things, these are laser focused in a way where the publishers now are going to court very specific content creators that they want. Ones who never who one all just love their stuff, just love their stuff unequivocally. Like, just they're not going to say a bad word anyways.
Yeah.
But also,
no criticism.
If you're like, say, a up and coming content creator, or you're having like some initial early success, they know that you're probably more hungry and more willing, to give them like the most positive possible spins. Because here's the thing, I am a person who was blacklisted from Capcom, heard it directly from their face. We had a good laugh about it years later, and I didn't bother. It doesn't bother me that I was. I mean, they were just doing their job, but there was a point in time during the Wii era where they were trying to get early good word out and buzz out for a lot of their non-major titles, and they sent me an early I was one of the few people to get one of the earliest review copies. It wasn't even a code, it was a copy because it was a Wii of a Resident Evil spinoff, and it wasn't good, and I was not kind about that fact in my review, and that made them very upset, and they remember the day where they're like, who is that blacklisted, make sure he never gets anything ever again. That was happening during the Wii era. That was happening in 2010.
Right.
That's going to be even. Do you think they got more lenient? No, of course not. Now it's more important than ever now to be that sort of laser focus where it's like, Sega's debuting a new Sonic game. Let's get a Sonic content creator who never has a negative thing to say and loves everything we do.
Yeah.
To come in and play this Sonic game early, because he's going to give the buzz, because he has street cred. He has, the credibility amongst his peers, because he's not a bought and paid for journalist. He doesn't work for a big media empire. He speaks from the heart. I'm like, well, he speaks from a place of, I just love everything because it exists kind of thing. So that's when then you end up getting this sort of like buyer's remorse, because and why this is important to the people listening. I'm like, because you're not going to get them. You're not going to, you want a wide variety of people out there. You want as many possible people to play an early build of a game, because you want to have skeptics, you want to have true believers, you want to have completely neutral party. You want everyone in on this. What you really should want from early game coverage of any game is you want the widest net of possibility, covered. You want the widest amount of opinions personally. You want non-believers, true believers, completely neutral parties. You want everyone to come in and play this thing and give their feedback and opinion. Because, and I'll give you the best example why, and we're going to keep going back to this. We've gone back to before, but we were taken into an early presentation for Cyberpunk.
Oh, right.
Me and Max looked at it and said, "This is like any video game ever." I don't get it. We were completely whelmed, whelmed by this whole presentation, and we're just kind of like,
You weren't even underwhelmed. You were just whelmed.
We're just whelmed, and people shoot us were mad. People were fucking furious. I had a guy come up to me in line the next day and tell me, like, basically, like, try to argue the point against us. Like, dude was at E3, had seen the same thing we did, and basically was trying to tell us why what we felt was wrong that we were watching. Like, when I was in the Link's Awakening remake line, like, this happened.
Oh, I was with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that guy in the Link's Awakening. Oh my god.
Yeah. So you remember, it's like, this is how much Cyberpunk came out. How was Cyberpunk when it came out? Not great.
It's the best ongoing game.
The best ongoing game. What not great when it came out.
Yeah.
And the thing is if more people had been kind of like, I don't know, this seems kind of basic leading up to the game, instead of everyone literally on like this cocaine infused sugar high of like, this is gonna be the greatest thing ever. And then it comes out and it's like, it's totally not. And it's like, well, maybe if there was a little bit more pushback from people like us who are like, I don't know, this isn't really selling me on the ideals of the game. It kind of feels basic. Maybe that would have given CD Projekt Red the confidence to delay the game if there was a lot of pushback. Because if most of the media, if the general vast majority of the media had said this game looks kind of they would sit there and be like, well, we definitely can't go into releasing this big project. Man, we've got to make it
right
big. So that they probably would have said, well, what's the problem? And then maybe they might have listened to this. Now there is the whole thing where it's like they were being pressured really hard by their shareholders to release a product, because they were running out of money. Yeah, in that it's also true. But I don't know.
They also had a bit of an ego because The Witcher 3 was in such high regard. I think they sort of thought they could do no wrong.
Yeah.
Which was weird to see. And I do think that they've come a long way on Cyberpunk. So part of the thing, anybody that's creating anything, that's like making something, I want to be positive about. I do. One, especially like with filmmaking, so like I know how hard it is. I do it all the time, and I don't think I've ever worked with anything personal, like in commercials and stuff. Yes, big budgets, sure, but my own personal stuff's never been more than a shoestring budget. I have like a couple $100 sometimes to throw towards whatever I'm doing. So it's not like I ever have like insane money to put on something. So with like developers in general, I want to be positive or come from a place of positivity. But I also think that you're getting a really big mistake when there are certain big content creators that, and I'm not trying to start beef or anything. So, but they will put everything in the light of, this is amazing because of blah, 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 while skirting all the issues it has. They'll pick whatever the best thing about it is and only talk about that thing. They'll make whole hour-long videos all about how this one particular thing's so good. And, oh, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of problem with this, but this is so good. Or they'll do things where they say, like, the potential.
Yeah, the potential's really there.
So good because they don't want to say
and I was like that for a long time at E3, but then I started to realize no, those demos are absolutely indicative of like the finished product quality. And before patches were a thing, it was really, really true. Where it's like, oh, this game, the graphics seem a little rough here, but it'll be patched up in time. Really, no, it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, these days, it's entirely possible, but I think we've even said it before, or you've even said it before, where it's like, oh, if it's 6 months out, they're not doing any major fixes.
Yeah.
Like, this is the thing.
If you're playing a demo in June for a game that releases in November or October, this is the game.
Yeah, they're not going to do any major.
They're just finishing the parts of the game you're not playing, but like with the part you are playing is done.
In some cases, they're not even doing that because it's already gone to press. Like it's already being
true. Yeah. So. Yeah, and there are cases, Halo being the big one, where it's like, okay, well, the finished game was definitely different than the one at the show floor.
Oh right, yeah.
That happens. So. But that was way more the exception than the rule. Way more the exception than the rule. And the blood, sweat, and tears a game would take if they ever did have a major change from E3 That just meant that like the developers just had to go through months of hell because of the negative feedback there. And then there's the other thing. Did you just cause months of dev crunch time because of all the negative feedback? Well, the reality is you should have just fucking delayed it. But no, we can't delay things because
Right.
we are enslaved to the shareholders in this corporatist hellhole of an industry.
And there's no changing it. That's a good note to end on.
But that being said, I do think there's a place for E3 and things like E3. Here's
There's
the
going to
thing.
be a successor. I don't know what it is yet, though.
Why PAX works, why MagFest works, is because at least on the surface, it doesn't feel like the game industry presents the game industry. We're like with the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, which was created to stop the government from raiding our video games, and later became the main defendants of loot boxes.
That's right. Yeah.
The thing is that this was the industry talking about the industry, where PAX came from Penny Arcade, a webcomic origin. So it feels like this was people who love video games got together and built a thing to show how, for people to come to and celebrate the thing they all love together. That's why Dragon Con is so good. San Diego Comic Con is really not so much anymore. And if you're a nerd dumb like me, who before the dark times was able to like bounce between both, you could the feeling you got between going to San Diego Comic Con and Dragon Con was night and day.
Right.
Same crowd size, and yes, they're technically still nerds there, sort of, but you could feel the corporatism reeking out of everything in Comic Con. You go to Dragon Con and it is a party. Like one is a hustle and one is a party. So that's the problem that E3 was. It just sort of like it felt like a snake eating its own tail in a way. Just how it all just sort of like went down. But like you could do E3 and you could still have companies coming and debuting, new demos and new product and making game announcements. But I think what you really got to do more than anything is you got to get away from having this sort of corporate feel to everything, that like you're basically because even when you look at the advisory board for even something like Game Awards or whatever, it kind of just like, oh, it's the industry judging the industry.
Yeah. They're all just patting themselves on the back.
In the back, right? So like what you need a game. And there's definitely an audience. There's clearly an audience for it, and there's clearly a need for it. You just need to have a trade show or a game show, whatever show, however you want to call it, a convention. You need a convention where it's not run by or has any influence on the logistics or the running of the show by anyone in the industry. Like the people running the show need to be running the show. That's their job. They're not there. They don't work for Epic. They don't work for Nintendo. They don't work for Sony. They don't work for Microsoft. It needs to be like, I run a convention, and hopefully it gets big enough to the point where like Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft want to go there, want to be part of it, want to have that sort of presence there, but they're not in control of the show and they don't have control over who gets to play the thing. And that's probably why it will have trouble getting off the ground and have trouble being the thing it should be, because these companies have gotten that taste of controlled narrative
Right.
with directs, with small game fest things, very pointed, directed, appointment only, hands-on times, and they've gotten that taste. And I think it's going to be hard to convince them that like you should have a wide variety of people trying your product out. No. Only hype, only good vibes.
Only hype all the time. That's a good tagline to end the Reboot, Reuse, Recycle episode.
Reboot, reuse, recycle.
We've got some patrons to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Cody W. Thank you, Cody. And our producers for this episode are Mutton Chops Johnson, Screwnami, Croy35, Hypervibrator 9, and Ziggy Z. Thank you, dudes, and we'll catch you next time.
Later, dudes.